it's a big and uncertain week ahead for South Africans with inflation data and interest rates announcements expected. Consumers are already balancing the country's many economic struggles, and if the Reserve Bank hikes interest rates, it will mean more pressure. The repo rate currently stands at 8.25%, the highest in 14 years. Economist Bonke Dumisa joins us via Zoom to discuss the week ahead. A very good evening to you, Prof, and thank you for joining us today. That interest rate decision coming out this week, the Monetary Policy Committee meeting from tomorrow. But before we look at the interest rate, what was encouraging was the last inflation print we saw showed that inflation, or headline inflation, came down somewhat, still way above the target band, but we did see a tapering down showing that the aggressive interest rate monetary policy by the Reserve Bank is starting to bear fruit.
Yes, I agree with you that by the way, good evening to you and your viewers of the eNCA. I agree with you that the inflation rate has been going down significantly, coming all the way up from 7.8% to 6.3% in May. However, I may not necessarily fully agree with you that it is because of the repo rate hikes by the South African Reserve Bank. Because you must remember that I always emphasize that the Reserve Bank has been using only one tool, because they've got only one tool, and that is the repo rate increase or decrease. But they've been punishing the South African consumers sometimes for imported inflation. And with your repo rate hikes, you cannot reduce the imported inflation. So what has been happening of late is that for some months now, the international Brent crude oil prices have been going down significantly. And because of that, the fuel prices in South Africa went down significantly. And that triggered the decrease in the inflation rate, as we saw it at 6.3% in May. And I know you're going to ask this question. Let me answer it now. So what do I think is going to happen for now on Thursday, the 20th of July? I see the South African Reserve Bank increasing the repo rate by not more than 25 basis points. It will increase it, which means it can only be 25 basis points. And what am I saying? Why am I saying that? It is because of the reason I've already given, that the inflation rate is still above their 3 to 6% target inflation rate range.
Prof, what are the chances, and thank you for going ahead of me there and answering the question that I suppose everyone wants to know the most over everything else. But because you mentioned that a lot of the inflation that we've experienced as South African consumers and households and businesses is imported inflation, and we've started to see that come down by way of a lower Brent crude price, what are the chances that the Reserve Bank may consider leaving them unchanged?
I don't think it's going to happen. The South African Reserve Bank always takes its cue from the US Federal open money market system. However, when the inflation rate is above its 3 to 6%, they just don't hesitate in increasing it. And it is still above their 3. You must remember that even when it is between the 3 to 6% range, the moment it starts moving above the midpoint of 4.5%, they normally start increasing the interest rates. So they will increase it. But the reason why I'm saying they will not increase it by more than 25 basis points, it is because they will be taking cue from what happened in the US, where they just left their federal interest rates unchanged. But for the US, it was easier for them to do that thing because their inflation had come down from above 8.2% to below 5%. We are still battling to push it within 3 to 6%.
And I suppose one of the biggest risks that it remain with our inflation outlook, Prof, is the inflation that has now contributed to the overall inflation figure, which is that of electricity. We're back in higher levels of stages of electricity load shedding at the moment. And of course, the Reserve Bank having previously flagging the inflation contributed to by the load shedding as a risk to the inflation trajectory. That is something that the SARB is still going to have to consider going forward while the rest of the world starts to taper down on the aggressive rate of increasing.
I agree with you on that one. And you must remember, and it did not start with Governor Kganyago. It started with the former governor of the Reserve Bank, Ubaba Utito Mboweni. He complained about the administered prices. When we're talking about administered prices, we're talking about water, the rates, electricity, and the like, that they are actually leading in pushing up the inflation. With Eskom really at one stage pushing for 22% tariff hike, and cities like Durban pushing up their tariffs by 18.65%, you cannot really keep the inflation down. But at least, fortunately for us, for this round of the repo rate hikes, those figures will only start kicking in from July onwards. So for now, because we'll be looking what happened in June up to now, I think we will get by with a 25 basis point increase. I've heard some people saying the South African Reserve Bank may be generous enough and not to push it up. I can bet my head, I can put my head on the block and say that will not happen.
I mean, if we see the aggressiveness of the governor, if that's anything to go by, your head is safe, Prof. No one needs to put your head on the chopping block. We will indeed get that increase. Thank you very much for that update. And of course, we'll continue to engage you throughout the week as we approach that decision on a Thursday. That is independent economist Professor Bonke Dumisa there talking to us about the interest rate, likelihood of the SARB increasing rates. And he said he put his head on the chopping block that they will be increasing interest rates. And I said to him, well, his head is safe because our governor has been quite aggressive with those interest rates. Still